The morning ritual never changed regardless of what my day would hold. I rose at 5:00 a.m., completed 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups, and brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. This discipline had carried me through military service, police work, and now into my role as the lead instructor for our county SWAT team. My name is Michael Sullivan, and for the past 15 years, I had been responsible for training the men and women who handle the most dangerous situations in our jurisdiction. The neighborhood I chose for my home stood in stark contrast to my professional life. Willow Creek Estates offered meticulously maintained streets, families who still had barbecues on weekends, and a quiet that helped clear my mind after days filled with simulated gunfire and tactical exercises. I had purchased my modest ranch-style home 3 years ago, seeking normalcy and routine away from the controlled chaos of training facilities. My neighbors were generally friendly, if somewhat curious about my profession. The Johnsons next door brought over cookies when I first moved in. The Rodriguez family across the street always waved when I returned home. Even Mrs. Peterson, the elderly widow on the corner, occasionally stopped me to chat about her grandson who wanted to join the police academy someday. The community felt safe, predictable, and separate from the intensity of my daily work. I had been warned about the homeowners association before purchasing the property. Friends told stories of power-hungry board members and ridiculous regulations. But I had lived under military structure for years and thought nothing could compare to that level of scrutiny. I signed the HOA agreement after a cursory glance, assuming reasonable people would enforce reasonable rules. That assumption would prove to be my first tactical error. The initial HOA meeting I attended revealed the true nature of what I had joined. Most board members seemed well-intentioned if somewhat obsessed with property values and neighborhood aesthetics. But one member immediately stood out from the rest. Patricia Winters, whom everyone called Karen behind her back, dominated the meeting with an iron fist and a never-ending litany of violations she had personally documented throughout the neighborhood. She stood at the front of the community center in her crisp beige pantsuit, hair cut in the stereotypical sharp bob, reading from a clipboard with obvious relish. The Thompson family on Maple Drive has unapproved garden gnomes. The Wangs on Oak Street left their garbage bins visible from the street for 6 hours after collection. And the new resident on Pine Court has installed security cameras without architectural committee approval. That last violation was mine. I felt eyes turn toward me as Karen continued. Security cameras alter the visual harmony of our community and create an unwelcome surveillance atmosphere. Her lips pursed as she stared directly at me. Mr. Sullivan will need to remove them immediately or face daily fines. I raised my hand and spoke in the measured tone I used when explaining complex tactical concepts to trainees. The cameras are small, unobtrusive, and necessary given the sensitive nature of my work. They are standard home security measures. Karen clutched her clipboard tighter. Rules are rules, Mr. Sullivan, no exceptions. This is not a military compound. That first encounter established a dynamic that would only intensify in the coming months. My home was my sanctuary after days spent in high-stress training scenarios. The small security modifications I had made were practically invisible but essential for my peace of mind. Karen and her rulebook represented a kind of threat I had not anticipated in this peaceful suburb, one built on control rather than community. The first violation notice appeared on my door 3 days after the HOA meeting. The crisp white paper detailed my unauthorized security modifications and demanded removal within 48 hours. I filed for an exception based on professional necessity, documenting my role as a SWAT instructor and the minimal visual impact of the cameras. The exception was denied without explanation. A second notice followed a week later citing excessive vehicle parking. My department-issued SUV had been in my driveway overnight while I performed maintenance on my personal vehicle in the garage. The notice specified that tactical-looking vehicles create an unwelcoming atmosphere in our family-friendly community. The violations became increasingly absurd. My lawn was measured and found to be a quarter-inch too tall on a Tuesday afternoon, though I had scheduled my regular mowing service for Wednesday morning. My mailbox was deemed non-conforming, despite being identical to the original installation. Even the color of my curtains became subject to scrutiny when they were visible through open windows. Each morning as I left for work, I noticed Karen's silver BMW creeping slowly past my house. She never acknowledged me with a wave or greeting, but her smartphone was always raised, documenting some new perceived violation. What had begun as an annoyance was evolving into targeted harassment. At the next HOA meeting, Karen proudly announced the formation of a neighborhood security committee with herself as chairperson. Recent concerns about neighborhood safety require proactive measures, she declared, passing out matching blue vests to 3 volunteers. Our security patrol will conduct regular checks throughout the community to ensure compliance with all HOA regulations and identify potential security concerns. I raised my hand again, maintaining professional composure despite my growing frustration. As someone who trains law enforcement officers, I should point out that neighborhood watch groups are meant to observe and report, not enforce. They have no legal authority to issue citations or enter private property. Karen smiled tightly. Thank you for your input, Mr. Sullivan. However, our committee has been officially sanctioned by the board. We are not merely watching. We are protecting our community standards. Several neighbors nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. I noticed a few sympathetic glances directed my way, but no one spoke up to support my position. The following week, I observed the security patrol making rounds through the neighborhood, clipboards and smartphones in hand. Their routes became predictable, and notably, they passed by my house 3 times more frequently than any other property. The rumors began shortly after. My next-door neighbor, Tom Johnson, pulled me aside one evening as I returned from work. "Just wanted to give you a heads up," he said quietly. "Karen has been telling people you might be unstable, said something about your military background and how you have weapons in your house." I thanked him for the information, my jaw tight but my voice calm. I own 2 legally registered firearms that are properly secured at all times. My military and law enforcement background makes me more aware of safety protocols than most. Tom nodded. "I figured as much, just watch your back. She seems to have it out for you." The confrontation I had been anticipating finally occurred on a Saturday afternoon as I washed my car in the driveway. Karen approached with 2 of her patrol members flanking her like bodyguards. Her clipboard seemed permanently attached to her hand, and she wore her blue vest despite the warm weather. "Mr. Sullivan," she began without greeting, "the committee has noted several potential violations that require interior inspection of your property." I continued rinsing soap from my vehicle. Interior inspection is not authorized under the HOA agreement except in cases of emergency. You can submit any concerns in writing. Karen stepped closer. "As head of security, I have broad discretion to protect community interests. Your continued violations suggest potential problems inside the home as well. We will need to conduct an inspection this week." I turned off the hose and faced her directly. "No, you will not. Any attempt to enter my property without permission will constitute trespassing. I suggest you review both HOA bylaws and state law before making such demands." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Sullivan?" "Not at all," I replied evenly. "I am informing you of legal boundaries. There is a difference." Karen scribbled something on her clipboard. "We will be documenting your uncooperative attitude. The board will hear about this." As they walked away, I noticed one of the patrol members photographing my house from different angles. Despite my extensive training in high-pressure situations, I felt my frustration building. These were the petty politics I had hoped to escape in this neighborhood. My tactical training urged me to develop a response strategy, but my commitment to being a good neighbor held me back. That restraint would soon be tested beyond its limits. The quarterly SWAT certification training always required my full attention and overnight presence at the training facility. As lead instructor, I oversaw 48 hours of continuous drills, simulations, and evaluations. The department had constructed a mock residential complex where officers practiced entries, hostage scenarios, and threat assessment in realistic conditions. The morning of my departure, I packed my tactical gear methodically into my SUV. Extra uniforms, training manuals, and simulation equipment filled the cargo area. Through years of habit, I scanned my surroundings as I worked, noting Karen's partially drawn curtains across the street. Her silhouette remained visible, watching my activities with obvious interest. Before leaving, I activated my comprehensive home security system. This was not the standard commercial package most homes utilized, but a custom setup I had designed based on my professional experience. Motion sensors covered all entry points. Cameras monitored exterior approaches and key interior rooms. Silent alerts would be sent directly to my phone rather than triggering an audible alarm that might alert intruders they had been detected. I had installed backup power sources and redundant communication methods to prevent system failures. I performed a final check of all doors and windows, set the system to away mode, and departed for the training facility. The drive took nearly 2 hours, and I arrived just as teams were assembling for the first briefing. "Today we focus on proper entry protocols," I announced to the gathered officers. "Legal boundaries must be respected even in emergency situations. Without proper authorization or exigent circumstances, entry into a private residence constitutes a violation of Fourth Amendment rights." The irony of this particular training focus would not become apparent until later. Night exercises began at 2100 hours. Officers navigated dark corridors wearing night vision equipment, practicing communication and coordination in limited visibility conditions. I observed from the control room, evaluating their performance and making notes for debriefing. At 2317 hours, my phone vibrated with multiple security alerts. Stepping away from the observation window, I opened the notification to find my home security app displaying warning messages. Motion detected at front door opening, motion in entryway, motion in living room. I switched to the live camera feed. 4 figures entered my home, led by an unmistakable silhouette. Karen, in her security vest, directed the others with authoritative hand gestures. "Check everywhere," her voice came through clearly on the audio feed. "We need to document any violations. Remember, this is an emergency inspection due to the reported water leak." No water leak had been reported. No emergency existed. This was a fabricated excuse for unauthorized entry. I watched in stunned disbelief as they moved through my home with casual disregard for privacy. They opened kitchen cabinets, inspected my living room, and even entered my home office. One patrol member photographed my military service awards and SWAT certification documents hanging on the wall. "Look at all this tactical stuff," the woman commented. "Kind of creepy if you ask me." Karen opened my desk drawers, rifling through personal documents. "This paranoid cop probably has cameras everywhere," she remarked, not realizing how correct she was. The audio captured their conversation clearly as they continued their invasion. "Should we check the bedroom?" one man asked. "Absolutely," Karen replied. "We need to be thorough. The water leak could be anywhere." I felt a cold fury building as I watched them enter my bedroom, the most private space in my home. They opened closets, looked under the bed, and one even had the audacity to open my nightstand drawer. "We should check the garage too," Karen instructed. "He keeps that tactical vehicle in there." My security system recorded every moment of their 27-minute intrusion. Before they departed, Karen paused in the living room and made a call on her phone. "Yes, we completed the emergency inspection. No sign of the reported water leak, but we documented numerous potential violations. I will prepare a full report for the board." The fabricated nature of their excuse was now explicitly recorded on my security system. Each frame of footage documented a criminal trespass, invasion of privacy, and potential theft of information, as they photographed my personal documents. I excused myself from the training exercise, explaining to my second-in-command that a security situation required my immediate attention at home. The drive back would take nearly 2 hours, ample time for my tactically trained mind to process what had occurred and formulate a response. As I drove through the darkness, my phone continued to send notifications of movement in my home as the intruders completed their illegal inspection. My training had taught me to control emotional responses, to channel anger into strategic thinking. That discipline was being tested like never before. These were not dangerous criminals or armed suspects I normally trained officers to confront. These were neighborhood busybodies who had crossed a sacred line. The violation was not just of my property, but of principles fundamental to civil society. Karen and her patrol had just made a catastrophic error, and they had no idea who they were dealing with or what consequences awaited them. By the time I reached the highway, my initial shock had transformed into resolute determination. This would not be a matter of neighborhood politics anymore. This was now a legal matter, and I had every second of their criminal activity documented from multiple angles. I pressed the accelerator, heading home to reclaim my violated sanctuary. My headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness as I pulled into my driveway at 3:47 hours. The neighborhood slept peacefully, unaware of the violation that had occurred hours earlier. From the outside, my home appeared undisturbed, but I knew better. I disengaged the security system and entered cautiously, surveying my living room with the practiced eye of someone trained to detect anomalies. The evidence of intrusion was subtle but unmistakable. The couch cushions sat at slightly different angles than I had left them. Books on the coffee table had been moved. A faint scent of unfamiliar perfume lingered in the air. In my office, desk drawers were closed but not completely, the alignment off by fractions of an inch. Papers had been disturbed, their edges no longer perfectly aligned. My military shadow box containing medals and commendations had fingerprints on the glass that were not mine. The bedroom revealed similar signs of invasion. Closet doors not fully latched, the corner of my bedspread slightly rumpled where someone had lifted it to look underneath. Even my bathroom had been searched, medicine cabinet left minutely ajar. I sat at my computer and accessed the security system's stored footage. With methodical precision, I documented the entire intrusion, creating backup copies on multiple devices. The high-definition video captured clear images of all 4 intruders' faces. The audio recording contained numerous damning statements confirming their awareness that no actual emergency existed. Most disturbing was the moment when Karen produced a key, a master key that should not exist outside of emergency services. She had unlocked my front door without hesitation, demonstrating she had likely done this before. The implications were serious, suggesting a pattern of behavior that potentially affected other homeowners as well. As dawn broke, I heard a car pull into my driveway. The security monitor showed Karen approaching my front door, clipboard in hand and blue vest proudly displayed. Her knock came at precisely 700 hours, the earliest time permitted for HOA business according to the very bylaws she claimed to uphold. I opened the door and maintained a neutral expression despite the anger still simmering beneath the surface. Karen's face showed momentary surprise at finding me home. "Mr. Sullivan," she began, recovering quickly, "I need to inform you about an emergency inspection conducted last night in response to reports of a water leak that could affect adjacent properties." I nodded calmly. "Please come in, Ms. Winters. I would like to hear more about this emergency." Her eyes darted past me, perhaps assessing whether evidence of the intrusion had been discovered. She stepped inside hesitantly, clearly expecting confrontation. "Our security patrol conducted a standard emergency inspection as authorized under Section 7.3 of the HOA agreement," she continued, voice steady, but eyes avoiding direct contact. "No leak was found, but several violations were noted, including unauthorized storage of tactical equipment and modifications to interior structures without approval." I gestured toward my couch. "Please have a seat. I have some questions about this inspection." Karen remained standing, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "The full report will be provided at the next board meeting. I simply wanted to notify you as a courtesy." "I appreciate that courtesy," I replied, my tone conversational. "Could you clarify who reported this water leak, and what evidence suggested an emergency requiring immediate entry without contacting the homeowner?" Karen shifted her weight. "We received an anonymous report. As head of security, I deemed it necessary to investigate immediately." "I see. And the master key you used, where did that come from?" "HOA bylaws specifically prohibit board members from possessing master keys to residents' homes." Her eyes widened slightly. "I do not know what you mean. The door was unlocked." "That is interesting," I said, reaching for my tablet, "because my security system recorded everything. Would you like to review the footage together? It quite clearly shows you using a key to enter my home at 11:17 p.m. The color drained from Karen's face. She had expected anger, shouting, perhaps even threats, reactions she could use against me to further her narrative of the dangerous resident. My calm, evidence-based approach was clearly not in her playbook. "I will need to consult with the HOA attorney," she said, backing toward the door. "Any security footage would need to be properly submitted through official channels." I nodded. "Of course." I have already prepared copies for the police department, the district attorney's office, and my personal attorney. Breaking and entering is a serious offense, as is invasion of privacy and false representation of emergency authority. Karen reached for the door handle. This is an HOA matter, not a criminal one. You signed the agreement. No agreement authorizes criminal trespass, I replied, still maintaining my composed demeanor. The police will explain the difference. After she departed hastily, I made several phone calls. The first to Captain Reynolds at the police department, a colleague I had trained with for years. The second to District Attorney Michaels, who had consulted me on evidence collection procedures. The third to Brian Chen, the HOA treasurer who had expressed concerns about Karen's methods at previous meetings. Each conversation was brief and precise. Evidence had been collected. Laws had been broken. A response was now in motion. As I ended the final call, I knew that Karen's reign of neighborhood tyranny was approaching its end. But tactical planning required patience and preparation. Before confronting the enemy directly, intelligence gathering would be essential. The next 3 days transformed my living room into an intelligence center. Laptop screens displayed property records, legal documents, and social media histories. My dining table held neatly organized folders containing printed HOA bylaws, violation notices, and neighborhood communications. This was not unlike preparing for a major tactical operation, except my target was not an armed suspect, but a suburban power structure built on intimidation and misused authority. My first discovery came through professional channels. A colleague in the county records department pulled the history of complaints filed against the Willow Creek Estates HOA. The pattern was revealing. 3 years ago, when Karen first joined the board, complaints increased by 347%. Most concerned, selective enforcement and harassment. None had resulted in official action because they had been handled internally by the HOA board itself. Social media provided another intelligence goldmine. Karen had lived in 3 different HOA communities over the past decade. Each time, she had quickly ascended to board leadership. Each time, community forum posts documented increasing discord followed by her eventual departure. In her previous neighborhood, a civil suit had been filed against the HOA under her leadership, though it appeared to have been settled confidentially. I contacted the attorney who had handled that case. While professional ethics prevented him from sharing specific details, his general advice was telling. Document everything. Look for patterns affecting multiple homeowners, and check the financial records. That is often where the real story emerges. Taking this advice, I requested copies of the HOA financial statements, which were legally required to be available to all members. The initial response was a delaying tactic claiming the records were being updated. I persisted, citing specific bylaws that mandated accessibility. The documents arrived 2 days later, heavily redacted, but still revealing questionable allocations to the Security Committee and Emergency Response, controlled exclusively by Karen. Meanwhile, I began careful conversations with neighbors. Tom Johnson confirmed that Karen's patrol had inspected his garage after he questioned increased HOA fees at a meeting. The Rodriguez family described a similar emergency inspection when they installed a basketball hoop without prior approval. When asked if they had authorized these entries, both families expressed confusion about what rights they actually had under the HOA agreement. "We thought they could do that," Mrs. Rodriguez explained. "Karen said it was in the contract we signed." I arranged a private meeting with Brian Chen, the HOA treasurer who had seemed uncomfortable with Karen's methods at previous meetings. We met at a coffee shop 15 minutes from the neighborhood to avoid notice. I have been trying to get better oversight of the security committee expenditures, he confided, voice low despite the bustling cafe around us. Karen created a separate account that only she can access. She says it is for emergency security measures, but never provides detailed receipts. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Nearly $30,000 over the past 2 years, he replied. Our annual security budget is supposed to be $5,000. This financial irregularity provided another avenue of investigation. I contacted 3 board members who had resigned over the past year, citing personal reasons in their resignation letters. 2 agreed to speak with me. Both described Karen's increasingly controlling behavior and intimated that questioning her decisions led to harassment. She got my employer's phone number somehow, one former board member told me. Started calling with concerns about my character until I stepped down. Between gathering statements and reviewing documents, I installed additional security measures around my property. New cameras appeared in less obvious locations. Motion sensors were recalibrated for greater sensitivity. I added a cellular backup to my security system in case conventional communications were disrupted. A breakthrough came when I discovered that Karen's security patrol had no legal standing whatsoever. The HOA bylaws permitted a neighborhood watch program, but explicitly prohibited members from representing themselves as security personnel or entering private property. The blue vests, official-looking clipboards, and authoritative manner were theatrical props in a performance of authority with no legal basis. I arranged a discreet meeting with 3 sympathetic board members in my home. With my security system recording their consent to the documentation, I presented my findings. The unauthorized inspections affecting multiple homeowners, the financial irregularities, the misrepresentation of authority, and the illegal possession of master keys. This goes beyond HOA politics, I explained, showing them selected portions of my security footage. This is criminal trespass, potentially fraud, and misuse of homeowner funds. The board members exchanged troubled glances. What do you suggest we do? One asked. First, revoke the security committee's authority immediately through emergency board action, I advised. Then support a full investigation of the financial records. But most importantly, be prepared to cooperate with law enforcement in the coming days. As they departed, I checked my security monitors one last time. Karen's car had driven past my house twice during our meeting. She was watching, likely planning her next move. But this time I would be ready. The intelligence gathering phase was complete. Now it was time for the counter-operation to begin. My living room had never hosted this particular type of briefing before. 6 individuals sat attentively as I outlined the operation using tactical terminology normally reserved for high-risk warrant executions. Captain Reynolds from the police department nodded as I described the target, the objective, and the execution timeline. 2 off-duty officers who had trained under me for years took notes. Tom Johnson and the Rodriguez family, now willing participants after learning their homes had been illegally entered, reviewed their roles in the operation. We are conducting a completely legal counter-surveillance operation, I explained, pointing to a neighborhood map with key positions marked. Our objective is to document criminal activity in progress and facilitate proper law enforcement response. This is not vigilante justice. This is citizens and officers working together to enforce actual laws. Captain Reynolds addressed the group professionally. To be absolutely clear, we are responding to documented criminal activity. The evidence Mr. Sullivan has already provided shows probable cause for criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, and possibly fraud. What we need now is to establish pattern and practice to build a solid case. The plan was straightforward. Intelligence suggested Karen and her patrol conducted most of their emergency inspections when homeowners were away, particularly overnight. My previous absence had provided such an opportunity, and we would create another one. I will make a show of loading my vehicle and departing tomorrow morning, I continued. Karen has been monitoring my movements, so she will observe this. The house will appear vacant, but Captain Reynolds and Officer Diaz will be stationed inside at these positions. Tom Johnson would host Officer Wilson in his home next door, providing secondary observation. The Rodriguez family would position their security cameras to cover additional angles of approach. All participants would maintain communication through a secure group chat. Inside my home, I had placed legal recording devices in every room. Small items in drawers and cabinets had been marked with invisible ultraviolet ink that would transfer to anyone handling them. Documents in my office had been replaced with decoys containing subtle misinformation that could later prove access had occurred. Remember, we do not confront or engage, I emphasized. We document everything and allow proper legal procedures to follow. The district attorney has been briefed and is prepared to file charges based on the evidence we collect. The next morning, I loaded gear into my SUV with deliberate visibility, even wearing my tactical training uniform. As expected, Karen's curtains moved slightly as she observed my departure. I drove away but circled back to the Rodriguez home where I would monitor the security feeds remotely. The wait lasted longer than anticipated. Hours passed with no activity. The team maintained position, communicating status updates through the secure chat. At 19:23 hours, movement was detected on the street. Karen's silver BMW drove slowly past my house, then continued around the block twice more before parking 2 houses away. Target vehicle in position, Officer Wilson reported. 4 subjects exiting, all wearing blue vests. Through the security feed, I watched Karen lead her patrol to my front door. She looked around cautiously before producing the master key. This time, she tested the doorknob first, perhaps checking if I had left the door unlocked. Finding it secured, she inserted the key without hesitation. Subjects attempting entry, Captain Reynolds whispered through the chat. Standing by. Karen pushed the door open and directed her team inside. Remember, we are looking for code violations and potential hazards, she instructed loudly, maintaining the fiction of legitimate purpose. The anonymous report mentioned possible unauthorized modifications to the electrical system. No such report existed. Once again, she had fabricated an emergency to justify the invasion. Her team moved through the house with practiced efficiency, suggesting this was indeed a regular operation. They photographed my belongings, opened cabinets and drawers, and made notes on their clipboards. When they reached my office, Karen directed special attention to my desk. Check everything, she instructed. This is where he keeps his important documents. As they rifled through the decoy papers, the ultraviolet ink transferred invisibly to their hands. One patrol member picked up a training manual I had intentionally left prominent on the desk. Should we take this? It might have information about police procedures. Karen considered this. No, he might notice if that disappears, just photograph the pages. This statement, clearly captured on audio, transformed their actions from trespassing to attempted theft of sensitive information. Captain Reynolds sent a single text message: "Execute now." Within 30 seconds, police cruisers with lights but no sirens pulled up in front of my house. 6 uniformed officers approached from different directions, effectively surrounding the property. Captain Reynolds and Officer Diaz emerged from their hiding positions within the house, badges displayed. "Police Department," Captain Reynolds announced firmly. "Everyone remain where you are." The shock on Karen's face was immediate. Her patrol members froze in various positions throughout the house, caught in the act with no plausible explanation. When additional officers entered through the front door, the reality of their situation became undeniable. "What is the meaning of this?" Karen demanded, attempting to maintain her authoritative demeanor. "We are conducting an official HOA emergency inspection." Captain Reynolds was professionally direct. "You are currently trespassing in a private residence. Please provide identification and explain your presence here." "I am the head of the Neighborhood Security Committee," she insisted, producing her HOA identification card. "We received reports of a potential electrical hazard." "Interesting," Captain Reynolds replied. "Because we have audio recording of you stating there was no such report. We also have documentation of you using an unauthorized key to enter this residence." Karen's expression shifted as she realized the extent of the trap. "Where is Michael Sullivan? This is his doing, is not it?" On cue, I entered through the front door, accompanied by Officer Wilson. "Ms. Winters, I believe you are standing in my home without permission. Again." The color drained from her face as she recognized not only me, but also the police captain who frequently appeared in public safety announcements. "This is an HOA matter," she stammered. "You have no jurisdiction." "Breaking and entering is not an HOA matter," Captain Reynolds replied calmly. "Nor is possession of unauthorized master keys or false representation of authority. These are criminal matters, very much within our jurisdiction." As the officers escorted Karen and her patrol members outside, neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the police presence. Karen's face registered additional shock when she saw Tom Johnson and the Rodriguez family speaking with officers, providing statements about previous unauthorized entries to their homes. The operation had succeeded beyond expectations. Not only had we caught Karen and her team in the act, but their own recorded statements had revealed clear intent and awareness that their actions were unauthorized. The district attorney would have more than enough evidence to pursue multiple charges. As Karen was placed in a police cruiser, she finally realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded of the officer. "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied professionally. "And more importantly, we know exactly what you did." The community center had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled for the emergency HOA meeting called 3 days after what residents now referred to as the incident. Board members sat at the front table, notably minus one chair where Karen would normally have presided. The agenda contained only 2 items: Security Committee review and financial audit findings. The board president, a normally reserved accountant named David Miller, called the meeting to order with visible discomfort. "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the serious situation involving our former head of security, Patricia Winters, who has resigned from the board effective immediately." Murmurs spread through the room. Karen had not simply resigned. She had been arrested, processed, and released on bail pending trial. The charges included breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, possession of unauthorized access devices, and misappropriation of funds. Her security patrol members faced lesser charges, having cooperated immediately with investigators. The board extends its sincere apologies to homeowners whose properties were illegally entered under the false pretense of HOA authority, David continued. We have been fully cooperating with the police investigation and have discovered that at least 17 homes were entered without proper authorization over the past year. The financial audit revealed even more disturbing findings. Karen had diverted nearly $40,000 from various HOA accounts into the security fund she exclusively controlled. Records showed personal purchases, unexplained cash withdrawals, and payments to the patrol members for their participation in her scheme. When invited to address the community, I kept my comments brief and focused on solutions rather than accusations. What happened here was not about HOA regulations, but about respect for legal boundaries and proper procedure, I explained. Moving forward, I would be willing to help establish legitimate security protocols that protect our community while respecting private property rights. The response was immediate and positive. Several homeowners approached me after the meeting, sharing their own experiences with Karen's harassment and expressing relief that her actions had been exposed. Board members requested my professional input on revised security guidelines that would prevent future abuses of authority. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed. The remaining board members, eager to distance themselves from the previous regime, embraced transparency and reasonable enforcement. The unauthorized master keys were collected and destroyed under police supervision. A new security committee was formed with clear limitations on authority and multiple levels of oversight. Karen's legal troubles mounted as the investigation expanded. The district attorney discovered similar patterns of behavior in previous neighborhoods, resulting in additional charges. While most cases would likely end in plea agreements, the consequences would include restitution to the HOA and affected homeowners, probation, and permanent records that would prevent her from serving on community boards again. 6 months later, as I supervised a training exercise for new SWAT recruits, I reflected on the unexpected battlefield where my tactical skills had ultimately proved most valuable. Not in confronting armed suspects, but in defending fundamental principles of privacy and proper procedure in my own community. Remember, I told the trainees watching the building entry simulation, the power you are entrusted with comes with absolute responsibility. Authority without accountability is not authority at all. It is tyranny, whether it wears a tactical vest or an HOA clipboard. The neighborhood had found its balance. My home was once again my sanctuary, and somewhere across town, in a much smaller residence than she had previously enjoyed, I like to think Karen was finally learning the lesson that even the smallest kingdom must be governed by law, not personal power.